Let's move on to the Eagles, who I do think they're worth a conversation here.
Man, are they interesting? Are they? I'm just going to sip. I want to know what you think of the Eagles, and then I'll offer up mine, because I'm writing a preview as we speak. I paused it to come on and do the podcast 15 minutes late because I lost track of time, but that's a different story. The
Frank,
Eagles are
again, you keep outing yourself on this show. I just want that on the record.
You're being very kind, Matt. What do you think of the Eagles? Because to me, I'm kind of confused. What do you think of the Eagles at this point?
Yeah, no, I actually was just talking about the Eagles on Chris Harris's podcast before this one. And
you were on a different podcast? You did a guest spot on another podcast? Really? Wow.
I got to stop. I need a body double. If there's anyone out there, that can do a really good Matt Harmon impression, and wants to be like a stand-in for me, hit my DMs. Anyways, beyond that, my need for a personal assistant, / body double. The Eagles are a team I think I've thought about a lot. Like, I did a piece for the site, like take shopping their offense, and I number one, you look at the roster on paper and it's really good. Okay. Mm-hmm. Players are all good. We know that. They're losing Jason Kelsey, which is a huge deal. Maybe the best center, of all time, future Hall of Famer, the whole thing, integral part to that offense. But again, on paper, they have the players to replace that. Mm-hmm. For me, the questions with the Eagles feel more like a little bit kind of like ineffable in a weird way, that the questions I have about them are like, I think that Kellen Moore can push the right buttons to get this offense where it needs to go. From a motion standpoint, like the stuff he's done conceptually from an under center standpoint is really good. I don't think he's the best offensive coordinator. I think he's got some problems in game sequencing, all that stuff. But the way he designs offenses is generally how you want to design offenses, to exploit great receiver talent, which they have. Mm-hmm. But we've never seen Jalen Hurts do any of that stuff. That like mixing of those two, like what Hurts has done with the Eagles, which I think they kind of need to get away from, and what Moore will bring to the table, like those two things, can they mesh? I don't know that. That's an unknown to me. So I can see a lot of ways where like AJ Brown has the best year of his career. They added some players, obviously Saquon Barkley, that should make this team a lot better. Defensively, I think some of the swaps they made are interesting. Mm-hmm. It's just, I can also see like midway through October, this offense isn't firing on all cylinders, Frank, because it's just a lot of change going from what they've done with Hurts to what Moore has done, and like who gives there, who adjusts the offense. Is it a Hurts adjustment, and can he do that? Or is it a Kellen Moore adjusting to make the offense more what Hurts has done typically, which has been shotgun, one side reads and then and all that stuff. So I think it's very interesting, sort of the molding of those two concepts.
Great points. And I agree with them all. And thinking about from the coordinator level, like you assume that they upgraded, but doesn't mean it's going to fit necessarily. It might, it should, but I don't know. This is a team. This is why you rarely see this, where a team is so good and then so bad overnight. They had a stretch of 31 games where they were 26-5. Like that is like some, dynasty type of record, right? You just don't do that in the NFL. From that point to the end of last season, when they got embarrassed by the Buccaneers, they were one of the 5 worst teams in football. Period. Yep. They were awful. Like they weren't just like losing fluky games and getting in a tail. No, they were terrible. They couldn't do anything right. They let Drew Lock drive 92 yards on them to win a game. They lost by 20 plus to the 49ers and Cowboys. They blew a 21-6 lead at home against Arizona, who went 4-13 last year. They got pantsed in the playoffs by the Buccaneers, who were there. They were awful at the end of last year. So I don't know how to reconcile all this. I really don't. Like, because you look at I wrote, one of the passages in my preview was, this team could win a Super Bowl. Nobody would be surprised. Yeah. It also wouldn't be surprised if Nick Sirianni is fired by Halloween. Why would it be? He barely survived. Like, I fully believe that Jeffrey Lurie was like, I'm 50-50 on this. Talk me into keeping you around. And they kept him around with basically, they stripped his power from him. So he's just kind of a figurehead now. Like, there's so much weird about the way the Eagles season ended. I don't know how to reconcile all of it. I don't know if they're going to be just back to what they were at the beginning of last season when they started 10-1. Or if they're going to be that team that was legitimately one of the worst teams in the NFL to fit. I have no idea. None. I don't know what to make of the Eagles.
What's so hard for me, Frank, is just like I'm looking at the roster on paper and I think it's still really good. Mm-hmm. I think it's better.
Should be, especially with the draft they had with the corners. Yeah.
Unlike Dallas, I think they're better on paper than they were last year. Like even on defense, young guys getting better.
Yeah, Bryce Huff coming in for Reddick, and I get what you mean, but that same team fell apart last year. It looked like they had the look last season, and I hate being body language police, right? But they had to look late last season of, can we just get this done with so we could be away from each other? Because we don't like being around each other. We don't like playing for each other. We just want to be done with this season. And they sure mailed it in the playoffs. So I don't know, man. I get it. Like, their roster is really, really good. And they needed to upgrade a cornerback, which it certainly did in the draft and all that. But just how bad and Nate Tice, our colleague, did such a great piece. I think it was right after the Buccaneers loss, of what happened to Jalen Hurts on this Philadelphia Eagles team. Go read it. I'll link to it in my preview, which is coming out in a couple weeks. It was so thorough of what happened with Jalen Hurts. And it was everything. Like, everything went wrong for Jalen Hurts. He couldn't handle the blitz, and teams took away RPOs, and they had no counterpunch. And maybe that's a coordinator level thing. But also, it's just shocking to see Jalen Hurts put up a 77 rating over the final 6 games of the season when that team needed him. The Eagles are just confounding to me.
Yeah, and like I said, I think Kellen Moore is going to put the things in place to help that from a structure standpoint. I do have questions about him as an in-game play caller, sequencer, the whole thing. But can Hurts do that? That's the thing. Is I think this is, I don't want to call this like a tipping point season for Hurts or something like that, but I do think it's like a pivotal moment in his career, if that makes sense. A pivotal like agree, next step.
Yeah, so, if he's that guy who struggled late last season, it's hard to come back in 2025 and be like, "Hey, Jalen Hurts could win MVP." Like, well, I don't know. Maybe that was a Carson Wentz type of thing where he just kind of caught lightning in a bottle one year. I love Jalen Hurts, but there's a lot of questions than you like about him.
Totally, I don't think he'll ever fall off like that. But I think that we just might be like, this is the ceiling, and we have we have to have everything right around him, which is really, really hard to do. So we'll see. I don't know. Again, the Eagles, I may have talked myself into the Eagles with this one, even though I generally feel pretty good about it. So